Okay, I'll start working on my line weight next. Don't worry if you miss some mistakes. I commonly find some during this stage as well. That's okay. The important thing to take away from this lesson is to get in the habit of stepping away from your drawing between stages to see if it needs any adjustments. That's the majority of the line weight. Hatch in the values of this shadow and the eyelashes before defining the iris and pupil. That'll help you see if it looks right. Then lightly hatch in the basic shapes of the dark areas and shadows, and the shape of the eyebrow. A great way to keep the planes separated and feel like they're going in different directions is to give the darker one a second, offset row of cross-hatching. So, for example, the eye socket stands out from the plane of the nose. Outline the shape of the highlight on the white of the eye, and there's a tiny highlight in here. I'm just going to get my sharpened eraser out and put that in as well. Just work your way around the drawing and build up your hatching until it has a solid basic structure. Now that some shading is in and the image is taking form, I'm seeing that this line can come up a little and the curve should be a little straighter. I think that looks much better. Now, rather than finishing the shading on this eye like we have in the past, I'm going to move to the other eye and start putting in the line work. This is a better habit to get into, rather than shading one eye to completion at a time. But I felt it would be confusing for the beginners taking this course to leave something so unfinished, not knowing how it's going to look in the end. There's almost no darker lines to adjust on this side because it's in direct light, so I'll do the line weight and shading steps together for this eye. I'm going to fill a flat value into the iris and pupil to help me see if I captured the likeness of the subject. Okay, next begin bringing up the value of the eyebrow with some basic texture and put in the first pass of shading around the eye. For now, I'm just shading in the basic shape, but remember, these are two separate planes, so we will have to define that better later. And keep in mind the highlight on the eyelid should line up exactly with the highlight on the eyeball. It's the same light source creating them both. Okay, now that the preliminary shading is in, take a moment to step back and examine your drawing. I can see that the iris in mine is misshapen. Some of you probably noticed that while I was doing the preliminary drawing, some didn't. Our brains aren't all wired the same. Some people have no trouble seeing mistakes during the line drawing stage. Some people need to see the pupils filled in. Some need to see basic shading in first. I'm just going to remove this side of the iris with my rubber eraser, and based on my mistake, I can see that my line just needs to be moved over to about here. And with that new line in, I can see the pupil is also shaped wrong. I'm going to start over to make sure I'm explaining this so that every student gets it. As you can see, after I erase the area, the sort of ghost of the drawing is left behind. I can see the shape of the pupil is oblong and comes out too far on the bottom left, so when I redraw it, I'm not comparing it to other aspects of the eye, just to the ghost of the removed line. And that's how I use my mistakes to make corrections. That's not perfect yet, but it does look much better. This is tricky to fix and may unfortunately mean erasing some of my shading, but the line on the right side of the iris is a bit off as well. That's it. It was just a small adjustment. I know it can be scary to have to erase and redraw areas, but it's usually pretty quick and easy. Don't let making changes intimidate you. Now I'll just shade the values back in and we're back on track. Now, since we're doing both eyes in tandem this time, instead of treating them individually, take a moment to step back and look at them together. Are they working together? Do your pupils and highlights look lined up? Does she seem cross-eyed? I'm noticing the shape of my iris on the left needing some adjustments. And when you reshape the iris, the pupil always needs to change a little too. That's all, it just needed a tiny adjustment. I think it looks much better now. Putting in any cast or drop shadows helps determine the distance between features if you're having trouble telling if an area is right or wrong. In this case, shading in the drop shadow from the eyelid changed how I see the shape of the iris, so now I know the pupil needs to be a bit lower. By the way, notice that the iris on the left has a dark line around it, and the one on the right doesn't. See the difference in how I handled that in my drawing? That looks good. The pupils seem to be about the same size. I'm going to put in the drop shadow from the eyelid on the right side next to make sure the shape looks correct as well. I think the expression is there. That's important. It looks like this eyebrow can come down a bit. On the left side too. It's an easy adjustment. I'll just erase off the extra. The shape of this eye needs to be rounder on top as well. I think I can just do that using my rubber eraser. Can you see how big of a difference that tiny adjustment made? Moving that line up a millimeter has made her look more concerned. The angle of this eyebrow looks like it could be slightly lower, and if that gets lower, the top of the eyebrow is going to have to come down as well, cause and effect. And that should do it.